morning coffee, everyone. It's going to be another great week. Jim Gatto, it's so good to see you from Sheppard, Mullin. How are you doing this morning?
Doing awesome, Mitch. Glad to be here.
I am 10x glad that you're here because, Jim, you're one of the top IP Web3 AI lawyers on the planet. I'm a big fan of the firm Sheppard Mullin, and it means the world to me that you've taken the time to join us this morning. We've already got a couple of questions coming in, and what we're going to be doing, covering what everyone needs to pay attention to in business moving forward in 2025, whether you're a lawyer, entrepreneur, business owner. This is where you want to be today. So share this out, bring your questions in, and we'll get started with the show. But Jim, let me give you a quick introduction because I think it's really important. Jim Gatto, James G. Gatto, he's a partner in the Intellectual Property Practice Group in Sheppard Mullin's Washington, D.C. office. He is the co-leader of the artificial intelligence team, the blockchain and fintech team, and leader of the open source team. And Jim, if I forget, remind me to ask you a couple of questions about open source because I've got questions about that. For over 35 years, Jim's been a thought leader on legal issues with emerging technologies and business models, most recently blockchain, AI, open source, and interactive entertainment. He provides strategic advice on all aspects of intellectual property and tech-related regulatory issues. We're talking about securities, gambling, AML, and especially technology and issues driven by new business models or disruptive technologies. And so that's why Jim's on today's show. This is fantastic. Why don't we get things started off with what got you interested in technology and law, Jim? I think a lot of people would like to know.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me here, Mitch. It's a pleasure. I've always had a fascination for technology. When I was little, I got Christmas gifts. You put things together, little mini robot things or whatever. So I've always had an interest in technology. And I studied electrical engineering and physics in college. And for various reasons, decided I didn't want to go into being a technologist. I wanted a broader perspective. And so I went into law and came out and started out. My first job was actually as a patent examiner. So I started in the IP field through working in government, deciding who gets patents, which was kind of a cool job. And then worked for a law firm the rest of law school and have been doing IP work for almost 40 years now. And what really kind of drives me, and if you look at my resume, you see all these things that look all different, right? Everyone's like, you have legal ADD. And the reality is, I'm fascinated by emerging technology and the impact and the intersection between that and business and law. Mm-hmm. Every time there's new tech, there's new legal issues, and tech always leads to legal issues, right? It always takes a while for the law to catch up. And I found that it's very interesting and rewarding. I've been doing it for the last 25 years at least, of trying to figure out those issues, on the forefront with other people who are pioneering lawyers, trying to see not just what the law is, all lawyers rely on precedent, but what's really interesting in the spaces I work in is you have to figure out where the law is going. It's kind of like hockey, right? Skate where the puck is going, don't go where it is. By the time you get there, it's not going to be there anymore. So I just find it to be a very rewarding and fulfilling career because there's always new stuff going on, and I get to leverage the passions I have for the intersection of law, business, and technology.
So understanding your background, your early interest in this space, looking at the last couple of years, maybe it's just me, but it seems like somebody threw some gasoline on the fire. It seems like there's a lot going on right now in the Web3 space, the artificial intelligence space. Am I right in that perception? Are things kind of like 10xing in speed and incorporation into our businesses? What's going on right now?
Absolutely. There's been a lot of studies and books written about this, is that the reason that new technologies get adopted much more quickly now than ever before is because we have other technologies on which they're built, right? So when you think about when the internet was commercialized, right? Every website had to raise $100 million to go out and try to find some eyeballs, try to find some people that would come onto the internet, right? Back then, it was still getting people to do it. Then you had to get them to come to your site. Now you have some of these platforms with billions of users that are already there. So you add a new feature, right? And you've got a huge install base of people to adopt it, right? And even if you're not a platform company, you can start a business and leverage platforms to reach people, right? So you're not spending a ton of money on advertising. And with the virality of new tech, as we were talking about before the show, like with Blue Sky, right? Look how fast that social media network has grown, right? Exponential, like incredible, because people are used to social media. And word gets out, hey, this is cool, it's different, and boom, before you know it, everyone is jumping on board.
What's interesting is Blue Sky is an open source platform. And what I'm seeing, and I'm certainly not a technology expert like you are, I just know enough to get myself in trouble. I like the way that it encourages third parties to build apps, to build solutions, to build different things that we can all use as users to have better user experiences, whatever our goals are, right? We all have different goals on these platforms. And a couple of questions that are coming in, Jim, I can paraphrase them. Open source, is that something we should all be paying attention to? What are your thoughts on open source? And then with respect to moving forward in 2025, AI, other technologies like open source, what are you at Sheppard Mullin? What are you looking at moving forward on behalf of your clients as far as what to keep their finger on the pulse of technology, on the ability to be faster and better, provide better client experiences? What in the world should we be focusing on? But maybe taking a step back, open source, is that important, and why should we pay attention to it?
Open source is critical. If you look at the history of open source, it's decades old. It was started as kind of a movement by some of the hippie software developers that thought software should be free. We shouldn't be beholden to the big software companies to fix problems, to add new features. And so the open source model was born. And fast forward, it's been adopted by business. 99% of the companies use open source to at least some extent. And what's fascinating to me is that despite that, while it's free, there are some legal implications. And a lot of companies don't set up effective open source policies. And we're seeing a little more lawsuits for lack of compliance on open source. And so one of the areas we do a lot of work with is helping companies deal with open source. We do diligence in deals to make sure companies have used open source in a legally compliant way. If you're buying a company that has a software program and they were using certain licenses that they didn't manage properly, they could be forced to make their software, which they want to be proprietary, available under an open source license, which kills the value, right? That's happened to Cisco. It's not theoretical, it's happened to companies before. So that's one thing. But as a transition into your AI question, one of the big things now is AI code generation. So these are tools that developers are using that leverage AI to help developers write code. And these tools are the AI models are trained on open source code, GitHub repository code, and other open source. And it's creating a bunch of additional new issues for companies that need to be managed. I mean, the productivity gain that developers are getting is amazing. What these things do is a couple of things. One is they can auto-complete lines of code, just like if you're doing a search query, it'll complete for you based on predictive text. It can proofread essentially code, making sure it's syntactically correct and all that to minimize errors and debugging later on. But it can also, you can say, hey, I need a calendar function for this program. Boom, it'll give you a chunk of code, and boom, there's your calendar function. So it can go from small stuff to big stuff. Incredibly powerful, but without going into a lot of detail, because I could do a whole hour on this, it's really critical for companies to update their open source policies to manage open source, because there's a number of risks. There's one pending lawsuit against GitHub right now that we're closely watching. That's pretty interesting, and it'll be pretty, I think, a key case in this area.
Well,
and that's about open source.
Yeah, but it ties into a question. I've got a couple of them, and that has to do with, is open source security and privacy, is it as strong as closed source or whatever the alternative is? What are things we should be paying attention to from a security or privacy standpoint? I always thought that open source is actually arguably more secure because you have more developers kind of tweaking the code. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. You'll hear different opinions from different people, but the nice thing about open source code is it's open, right? If there's bugs, someone's going to find them, right? If there's security flaws, someone's going to find them. If there's code errors, people are going to find them, and that's the whole point of, you have a community of people that are analyzing the code, inspecting it, modifying it, improving it, and through the kind of the crowd, the power of the crowd, you're theoretically getting a better product. Now, for any given open source project, right? If it's early, there may be security issues, so you want to take the same precautions you would take with anything else, but you have a greater ability to see inside the code. Whereas with proprietary code, where you're just getting an executable file, you don't know what's under the hood.
So, Jim, everybody wants to know, with the new administration coming into office, with possibility of deregulation, some other changes, right? Good or bad, however you look at them. What are some things that you're paying attention to in the AI space with respect to AI development or the implementation of AI in companies and businesses, both mid-size and large, moving forward in 2025? What are some things that everyone should probably be paying attention to?
Yeah, so I think
the
biggest issues in AI right now, there's about 35 or so pending lawsuits involving generative AI. Now, if you expand it out to other AI, it's more than that. But I think the more interesting ones, a lot of them are in the generative AI space.
And generative AI is what?
So generative AI. So just briefly with AI is not new, right? A lot of people just heard about it in the last few years with ChatGPT, et cetera. AI was invented in the 1950s, right? So it is 70-year-old technology, but it's kind of gradually improved, and it's gone through iterations of being more what I would call deterministic, meaning you would have what was called like expert systems. You would have people who would map out a domain and they'd say, if this happens, do this, and you would program a computer to be able to look like it's responding in real time to stuff and making decisions, but it was all programmatic, so you knew it was going to do. Generative AI is more, the generative part means it's creating new stuff, right? So the good and bad of that is you're training these models on tons of information, general information, right? Now there are some specialized tools, but the big tools are general training. And you can create new content, you can do things, that you couldn't do before. The problem is that the output is not predictable, right? It's not deterministic, like kind of machine learning, doing like, crunching numbers and using AI for machine learning for those types of purposes. So it creates a whole bunch of new issues. And one of the things that I think is important to your question of like, what are we following? So in these lawsuits, and again, we've kind of thought through a lot of these issues before these lawsuits were filed. There's some new issues coming up as well, but one of the key questions that will ideally get answered in one of these lawsuits sometime in the near future is, does training an AI model on copyrighted content constitute infringement, or is it fair use? Because a lot of these tools, what they're doing is they're basically scraping the web and just sucking everything down and training models on it, all right? Because AI needs tons of data, and they're getting trillions of parameters in some cases that they're using with some of the bigger models. And in it, you're going to have copyrighted material, you're going to have privacy information, you're going to have biometric information, kids information. There's all kinds of stuff that's in there. And the use of some of that content, just because it's publicly available, doesn't mean it's legally permissible to use, right? So that's one big issue, because for these tools to continue to work, they need that level of data. So that's one of the real big issues that we're seeing. The White House executive order, which was signed by President Biden just over a year ago, it just had its 1-year anniversary on October 30th. There were 150 mandates to different agencies to take certain actions within 90 days, 180 days, 270, and 1 year. And all 150 of those were met. Probably the first time in the history of the U.S. government that something that
I didn't know that, really.
On time. And if anyone needs, we have the report of kind of what has been done. And so to your question about, kind of what else are we looking at and what does the new administration mean to kind of tie those together? I think it's too early to really tell what it means from the perspective of the new administration. The only thing I like to predict about politics is that it's unpredictable. So that's a safe prediction right there. But I think in general, with Trump being aligned with Musk and others, I think you're going to see a pro-tech adoption, right? We're seeing the government, a lot of the agencies as part of the executive order have each appointed an AI officer, a chief AI officer, to lead the agency action for two things. One is for the government to make better use of AI to improve government efficiency, costs, et cetera. And also for some of the agencies that are regulating AI, and there's many of them, right? The FTC is just one. You got the EEOC, you got a bunch of others we can talk about. I think part of the guidance is how they should regulate. And I think some of the things that are in the executive order will likely continue with the new administration. There's, one of the big categories of things is critical consumer decisions. So use of AI for things like employment decisions, patients, healthcare information, students, consumer financial loans, housing, things that actually impact people's lives. You don't want an unpredictable AI solution. You can use AI as a tool, but you want humans making the ultimate decision and make sure that it makes sense. I think all that will clearly continue. Where we go with, and I think the government use of AI will continue with the new Department of Government Efficiency that Musk and Vivek are kind of assisting with. I think they will significantly leverage AI to help with that. Where we go with international policy and where we go with, how much we impose obligations on big AI companies to disclose what they're doing and be transparent. That's where I think the jury may be out on, whether the new administration goes in the same direction as the old administration was leaning.
It's interesting because, the only constant in business is change, right? And when you combine that change with new technology, with new politics, with new laws and interpretation of those laws, I think for the lawyers in the world, things get really interesting. And if we advise our clients appropriately, things turn out and get interesting for them, but turn out well. So with all of those things in mind, Jim, it's looking at the IP copyright issues. And I know that's something, that you specialize in, that you focus your practice group on. And by the way, everyone, I'm speaking with James G. Gatto, AKA Jim Gatto of the Sheppard Mullin DC office, one of the top IP Web3 lawyers on the planet. So glad that you're here, Jim. With all of that in mind, with these pending court cases not being resolved, do we encourage our clients in 2025 to be conservative with their business and marketing and branding efforts when it comes to utilizing AI with third parties out in the public? Do we wait until these cases get resolved? I mean, how do you handle this? And along with those issues, is there any type of liability insurance coverage to cover our clients for any claims coming down the pipeline on these issues that we're talking about?
Yeah, so great question, and that's where we spent a lot of time is advising companies on, how to manage it. Right when ChatGPT first came out, and some of the other large language model tools, a lot of legal departments were kind of caught a little flat-footed because it was so new. They didn't have a lot of in-house knowledge on AI, and some companies banned the use of AI. We're seeing very little of that right now. Companies are moving forward. The productivity is incredible. What we advise companies to do, and this is a lot of what the work that I'm doing with companies right now, is you just got to set up an AI governance structure and develop policies that work for your company. There's not a form policy, but there are certain uses that are safe. There's others that are riskier, but you get great trade. You get great efficiency. So for different companies, we're seeing different trade-offs and how much risk they're willing to accept and what they're not willing to accept. We're even seeing within the same company, we're seeing different business units have different risk profiles depending on what the role of that business unit is. The short of it is, what every company, in my opinion, needs to do, bar none, there's not an exception to this. Every company should have an AI committee. Some people are appointing one person. I think that's a mistake because there's multiple facets to this, right? You need to have different perspectives in the company. But whether you have one person or a group of people, you got to designate them and empower them. And the second thing is they need to be educated. I don't mean this in a disparaging way, but as you said, the law changes. A lot of the people on these committees aren't lawyers. They're business people. They're CTOs, and it's important to have them involved. They need to understand the legal issues. What's clearly legal, what's clearly illegal, and where's in the gray area. How do you get toward one end or the other? And then once they understand the issues and the business ramifications, then we help them develop written policies. Then you have to educate the employees on it. And then you have to do this every 3 months because everything's changing. There's 700 pending bills, both federal and state, on AI. California just passed a dozen or so, as you're probably familiar with. Colorado passed the most sweeping consumer protection for AI. It comes into effect in a little over a year. But you got to stay up to date on what's going on, because you may make decisions in your policy that look prudent today, and either your company's use of AI may change or the law may change. And so you need to constantly adapt. That's the answer is use it, but use it prudently and have the right guardrails within your company.
Jim, based upon the questions that are coming in, I do want to pivot over to blockchain technology.
Sure.
But before we do, as far as educating and training, can you comment on how important it is to make sure your team, your employees, your entire company is on the same page with respect to what they're using and how they're using it? You don't want half of your team using the free version of GPT when the company is investing in an API security protected version of an AI, right? Everyone needs to be on the same page. Can you comment about that a little bit? Because I think that's the weak link in everything we're talking about.
Yeah, so absolutely. So that's a really key point. I mean, for the companies that haven't developed a policy or haven't adopted some of the enterprise versions of tools, whether you like it or not, or know it or not, your employees are using the free versions, and it creates huge risk. If you look at the terms of service, in some of those, if you create infringing content with an AI tool, you're indemnifying the tool provider. You're not getting an indemnity. With some of the enterprise tools, you're at least getting indemnified. So one way to manage at least some of the risk, you mentioned insurance earlier, we didn't touch on that, but indemnity is one way. Insurance, there are some insurance products that are available as well. And so the problem is a lot of the employees don't understand that that these legal ramifications exist. A lot of them don't understand that the output of these tools are typically not copyright protectable. And so if you're using the tool for something the company would normally want copyright protection for, it's not a good idea because you're not going to have the protection. Doesn't mean you can't use it. You can use it for inspiration, but you can't use it to just use the output, for example. So a lot of issues like that once employees understand it, and especially if the company adopts an enterprise tool that minimizes some of those issues, it's much better for the company.
Let's pivot over to blockchain. I'm excited about blockchain technology. What are your thoughts? Maybe a 30-second overview of what is blockchain technology in the business world, and what are your thoughts about it moving forward?
Yeah, so I got involved with blockchain back in 2012, and have been.
Wow, I didn't even know it existed back then.
It was yeah, it's a little older than that, but it is an incredibly powerful technology that most people don't understand what the technology is. But one of the key issues with blockchain is what's referred to as decentralization. So if you look at some of the big calamities that we've had, you look at the Enron, you look at the Madoffs, you look at the the mortgage collapse in 09. Incidentally, the Bitcoin white paper came out right after the financial collapse, right? And it references some of what was going on. So, it's not disconnected. There is a lack of trust in big organizations, big government, and all that. What blockchain essentially is a technology that instead of relying on a single entity to process and validate transactions, there is a network with a network protocol, and there's many different blockchain networks, and they work differently. But one of the common things for most of them is it is the network that and the protocols that validate transactions. So instead of trusting in people, you're trusting in the technology. Now, some blockchains are really good, some have proven to be bad. But again, you do your diligence. If you have a good blockchain, you've got solid technology that creates greater transparency, because every transaction, at least information about it, is on the blockchain, right? There's no hidden off balance sheet things like Enron was doing, et cetera. So you got transparency, you've got reliability, and you don't have to trust that someone goes amok and does something wrong.
So
at a high level, it's a very sophisticated database, but primarily for processing transactions.
Companies, should they be embracing blockchain technology moving forward? If so, what are some legal things they may want to pay attention to? If someone came to you and said, hey, Jim, this is what we want to do with our company. I know, like, for example, the state of California is using blockchain technology now. It's an option with our California driver's license or California IDs. We can have it on our digital wallets. If a state comes to you and says, hey, Jim, what do we need to look at? What are the issues? What should we do next? What are some of the 30,000 foot level things that you're sharing with them that maybe my listeners and viewers would want to know?
Yeah, so the very first thing, essentially, with both blockchain and AI, we're seeing everyone wants to use them because they're cool, they're kind of the shiny new object. And one of the first questions I ask clients is, why do you want to use blockchain, or why do you want to use AI? Right. If you want to use it just because you want to use it, that's usually a dumb reason, right? What's the problem you're trying to solve is the first question. The second is that technology a good technology to solve that problem? It's a great technology, but not for every problem, both blockchain and AI. So that's the first thing, right? There has to be, a rational reason for it. But assuming you're doing it, and this is where, the rest of the answer to your question gets very diverse. There are a lot of legal issues. And the problem is that many companies aren't aware of the full range of legal issues. And that's part of why we've got a team of over 45 lawyers on our blockchain and fintech team. And it's like a bad law school exam. Like a lot of the business models that companies adopt, there's multiple legal issues. And so, usually I'm involved in kind of on the point end and have a pretty broad perspective of kind of the range of issues, and help clients spot the issues and bring in the right team members that have the right expertise to really dig in and solve the problem. And same on AI. We have over 100 lawyers on AI with all different legal backgrounds, industry focused, technology expertise, because these are all multidimensional legal problems. There's very few, as much as I know, I can't solve all the problems for one client. It's almost always a team effort.
There's a lot going on, and that's why, Jim, you are one of my go-to guys when it comes to referring clients to an experienced firm, whether it's IP copyright, whether it's AI, blockchain, Web3. Appreciate all the value you bring to the community. Appreciate everything you do. For those of you listening, I actually put up Jim's Sheppard Mullin URL. You can catch it in the recorded version of the show. I'll put it in the show notes. But Jim, this has been just a lot of fun. If anyone would like to reach out and either ask your team questions and or retain Sheppard Mullin to assist them with anything that we talked about, what's the next best step for them to take?
Yeah, so absolutely. Email me with the email you have up there or on LinkedIn. But we're happy to have an initial conversation to understand what you need, and how we can help you, and kind of go from there. A big part of, as I said, a lot of times, with more established technologies, most clients, they have legal questions. They know what the questions are. A lot of people in this space, they need someone to help them understand what they don't understand, right? It's not just doing legal work. It's helping them really assess. One of the things, if we have time for this,
sure,
across all the areas I work, right? You look at the different fields and stuff. One of the common denominators is that we're dealing with incredibly creative people, right? They're pushing the envelope on new business models, using new technology in new ways. And there's always a tension between like doing that and doing it in a way that's legally compliant. And so we see a lot of really good business models that just have a legal problem, but sometimes we can help a client tweak it and fix it, right? Tweak the model so it's still interesting from a business perspective, but more legally compliant. Other times we tell people, look, this is a non-starter, right? You do this, you're putting yourself right in the sights of the regulators. So, it's not just a don't do this. We try to help people where it's fixable. But it's really just, for me, it's fascinating and rewarding to work with these incredibly creative people. And that's the part that gets me up every day.
What's interesting, Jim, is I've noticed as, a litigator for 3 decades, I'm going to guess about 95% of the cases that I've litigated probably could have been resolved in that first month of dispute had people been advised differently, had different early business decisions been made. And, I want everyone to double down on what you just said, because it sounds to me like with proper counseling, they can avoid obvious issues, that you see that they may not even be. What is the term I'm thinking of? Something about we're as good as what we don't know, or what's the phrase I'm thinking about?
Yeah. We're only as good as what we don't know, or something like that.
Yeah. And I've never seen that more applicable than in today's, legal business technology space. And surround yourself with excellence, everyone. That's the key. That's what we're telling our clients to do. And like I said, Jim Gatto is one of the lawyers who I know, like, and trust, and I feel will absolutely get you going in the right direction. But we're not here today to do a promo for you. I just appreciate you coming in and talking tech geek stuff with me. And I want to just put out an offer to you. If you have anybody on your large team who you think would like to be on the show to talk about any of the different elements or aspects that we've talked about, it would be my pleasure. Just reach out and I'd love to get them on and talk about one of these little nuanced things that I see you writing about, every week on LinkedIn, or something that we're not paying attention to. That's what's fun about these shows, is we get to peel back the layers of the onion and talk about things that most people don't talk about. So, Jim, this has been a blast. Really appreciate it. Okay.
My
All
pleasure.
right.
It's been great, Mitch. Thank you very much.
All right. You're welcome. Stick tight for just a second. Those of you joining us, thanks for joining us. Great show tomorrow. We are dark next week during Thanksgiving, but we'll hit the ground running the week thereafter. Take care. Enjoy this crazy AI, Web3, blockchain, upside down business legal journey that we're on, and never stop making each day your masterpiece. Bye-bye, everybody.